I'm really happy to be joined for this conversation, this human conversation, with my cousin Kerry, who runs the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Foundation. We're obviously related. And I thought that she would have a really great perspective on the Charlie Kirk assassination. That is a political assassination. Her father was politically assassinated. And I thought she could shed some light on what happens to a family in a moment like this. We so rarely think of people's families in political life. We think about the individual, who the president is, who that senator is, that congressperson, but we don't really think about the family that stands behind them, that's at home. And I thought, Kerry, can you imagine what Charlie Kirk's family, his parents, he's young, right? He's 31 years old, what his family is going through and what will happen to them collectively from an incident like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to project on anyone else's experience, but I'll just say that I think this is going to be a very, very tough one for them. They've lost their son, they've lost their father. Those little children have lost their father. The wife has lost her husband. And this was extremely public. I mean, I have to turn off the news again, probably 10 times in the last 24 hours because they were showing the actual shooting.
Yeah.
And that's going to live on forever. So if any of those kids ever look up, who was daddy? When did he live? What happened to him? That's the first thing they're going to say, is that a horrible moment of his death. And, that is a kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, which they will have anyway because of what happened to them and what happened to their father. But that's also going to be forced on them because when they pick up a magazine or newspaper, they see their father's image somewhere, that's what it's going to be. So it's going to boomerang them back to the worst moment of their lives for the rest of their lives. And
Over and over, over and over.
and over and over and over. And every time they go out and introduce themselves, somebody's going to say, oh, I remember where I was when I heard the news about your father. I loved your father so much. He was my inspiration. And when he died, it just destroyed me. And then they're going to have to be there in that moment. And then that person's going to say, what would you like for lunch? And then they're going to have to switch from wait, what?
Yeah.
Where are we? So, I think when we were kids, I was 8 years old when my father died, and you were a few years older when Daddy died, and a few years younger when Uncle Jack was killed. We didn't have access to a lot of the systems that are out there in common today. So psychiatrists were not easily accessible for our family. I mean, of course, we had the wealth and the access to them, but mental health was so prescribed that you wouldn't think, our parents wouldn't consider bringing in psychiatrists for small children, whereas that's accessible now and really, I think, important. And grief counseling for families or for school kids who are going to be in the classes with those children or the parents. So I think there's more awareness now than there was in the past. And I think there's, but I think it's going to be a tough road for them. And then I think part of it is their own relationship to this. I mean, Maria, when I was with my dad campaigning in California on June 4th, and we had gone to Disneyland the day before, and then we went that night to the Ambassador Hotel, and we were watching the returns come in. And at a certain point, the younger children, I was 8, were sent back to the hotel. We were staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And the next morning, I was 8 years old. I had jet lag. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and went into the little living room of our hotel and turned on Bugs Bunny. And that's when I learned my brother had been killed, had been shot. I mean, that craziness of how are you told? When do you find out? Do you find it through public means? Does somebody come and tell you?
Yeah.
That's so tough. And then and then he died a couple of days later. And my brother Joe called me. He was 15 and said that we had lost Daddy. And I remember going into my bedroom and praying for Daddy. And then praying for the guy who killed him. And saying, please, God, don't let anyone hurt that man. I don't want I don't want him to have children who are having to go what we're going through. I don't want his parents to have to do this. We have to stop the killing.
Yeah.
And, for me, I think in a way that was a gift from God to an 8-year-old child, sort of understanding that this little broken heart could not also handle the rage, the anger and the rage that could naturally be the response to that type of violence. But also there's wisdom in that to stop the violence. And I think, again, when you see the news reports, you kind of see those two reactions. And those were two reactions in my own family of some people saying, we gotta stop this guy. And others saying, no, what we need is peace. And we need to stop the violence in our communities, in our country, in our world. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, your dad spoke about stopping the violence after Martin Luther King was so violently assassinated. That's a very famous moment where he went to try to kind of remind the crowd that that love was an option, that peace was an option. And yet today, that doesn't feel like it's something in the zeitgeist, right? People say thoughts and prayers, and everybody screams at you for saying thoughts and prayers. People, even if you don't agree with someone politically, if you say, I'm thinking of you, they're like, no, you're not. You're this side or that side, and it's all about blame. What do you think it'll take for us to get to a place of advocating for peace, for advocating for love, for saying this has got to stop? This is too much.
Well,
this is rattling at a different level.
Let me just respond to that in this way, Maria, because I think your analysis is correct if you're looking at social media. But my experience with actual people is different.
Yeah.
There's much less vitriol and much more compassion and kind of an attempt to understand that's out there that I think we need to hold on to.
Yeah.
I would say that in general, and not not be caught in thinking that what you see on social media platforms, which after all make their money out of people fighting with each other and saying the most vitriolic thing they possibly can, because that's the one that would get more clicks. That's different from how I think a lot of Americans walk through life. also, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, this is, what would it take? I think in some ways it takes kind of a almost a spiritual
exactly
reawakening of people feeling like I don't need to lead with my head. I need to lead with my heart. You know, and to listen, to take the moment, the time, to listen to the pain that they're feeling.
Yeah.
And to understand that other people are feeling that pain. And that we need to, this is a moment to reach out to towards one another, to say, I'm there with you, my heart is with you. I see the dignity in you. Even if you don't see the dignity in me, I see the dignity in you, and you're deserving of love and kindness.
And you're saying that we should be doing that regardless of somebody's political affiliation, regardless of someone's political leanings, regardless of whether we agree or disagree with someone, that there's an opportunity in this moment. I wonder, what is the opportunity in this moment?
Well, let me just say, Maria, that people think there is this idea that compassion or peace is passive, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's very tough. Yeah. So, I mean, just going back to my dad for a moment, Martin Luther, he was campaigning in Indianapolis in Indiana in the 1968 primary, Democratic primary, and he was told that Dr. King had been shot and then killed. And John Lewis had organized this rally in the largest Black neighborhood of Indianapolis. And Daddy was going to go speak at that rally. And the mayor of Indianapolis said, you can't go because it's too dangerous. And cities across the country are on fire. And John Lewis said, you need to come, and Daddy went. And he gave that extraordinary speech.
Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in.
The next day, he made one more campaign stop, and he went to Cleveland. And he did that because the headlines were all these white city fathers across the country saying, now we owe the Black community nothing because they've they've set the cities on fire. And Daddy wanted to counter that argument. And so he went to this part of white power. And he said, he talked about systemic racism. And he said, there's a more powerful force than a shot in the night, a more deadly force than a shot in the night. And that is sending a kid to school without books, or demanding that a father provide for their family and not give them a job that pays a decent wage, systemic. And then he flew home to Virginia. And I remember so well, all of us, all of the kids and my mother were sitting in the den of our house watching this big television set, and we were watching Washington, D.C. in flames. And my father came down the stairs, and he had shorts on and t-shirt. He was going to play football with us, and he watched for a few moments, and he turned around and walked back upstairs, and then he walked out the door. And 15 minutes later, there we were all watching Washington in flames, And there he was in the middle of the flames, trying to stop the violence.
Mm.
And I mean, to me, that is compassion. That is leadership. That is what all of us need to do. We need to stop sitting and watching television,
Yeah.
saying how terrible this is. And we
Right.
run into the flames. Today is September 11th.
Mm.
Remember those firefighters when everybody else was fleeing the buildings and they were running into the flames
Yeah.
to save us, to save our country. We all have a role to play. And we need to run into those flames of anger and rage and violence and dispute with one another and find ways to say, I disagree with you, but I love you.
Yeah.
And we can have both of those things at once. We can love one another and completely disagree. And
You
that's
know, when your dad was assassinated, when Uncle Jack was assassinated, there was this feeling I felt anyway as a kid that the whole country was mourning with us, that the whole country felt this moment like we felt the moment, right? And now it feels like we're so polarized, we're so divided, we're so angry, and people are so scared that they're afraid even to show this kind of grief. They're afraid to come together in this moment because they may say, I don't agree with what Mr. Kirk was saying, or I didn't hold those same positions. They somehow kind of can't find the humanity in the moment. Why is kind of coming together in a moment like this, sharing in a family's grief, a powerful antidote to hate and fear and division?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be interesting if if there was a way to easily connect to that family.
Yeah.
You know, how do you do that? I mean, I was thinking myself, I want to reach out to them and
Right.
say, I know how this feels. I'm
Yeah.
with you. But how do you do that? You know, I think people need an outlet for um their feelings of mourning and their feelings of fear and their when this happened to us, it was so extraordinary,
Mm.
right? So, but in that 5-year period, we lost Jack and we lost Medgar Evers and we lost Malcolm X and we lost Martin Luther King and we lost my father. Those 5 huge leaders over the course of those 5 years. But now this happens all the time. That happened to Charlie Kirk yesterday, and it also happened to the 3 school kids.
Yeah.
It has become so common, so commonplace that it doesn't, I think that people don't feel the shock in the way that they felt it in the past.
I feel I have to say my kids who are all the same age, right, as your kids, they're all in their 30s. This young man was their age.
Yeah.
And you said this was on social media. And they are, I was speaking to my son this morning. He said, this has rattled me more than anything.
Mm.
Uh, he goes, I'm not even exactly sure why. That it was so stunning that at a college campus
I
in
mean,
broad
at a college campus,
right, in broad daylight, right? And to such a
Yep.
young person
Yep.
with a young family and the brutality of that, I think, so often, whether it's a school shooting or even with the lawmakers in Minneapolis, right? We don't see, we haven't see it, we don't see. And so
Well, right. Like I said, it's all over social media at the moment from 10
and
different angles. It's
yeah,
horrible.
and so I think that this moment has rattled people in a different way. Um, of course, everybody, a lot of what's on social media, I agree with you that when the people you see in everyday life, I always find are like kind and compassionate and helpful, and I go to Special Olympics and I'm, humanity is good, or you go to, some of the work you're doing with your human rights and you're like inspired by what's going on in the world, right? So there is that, and it's important not to lose sight of that. But in this country at this moment, when, people are finger pointing and taking sides, it just seems to me that there is, in this division, in this fear, in this a window to perhaps do something differently, to perhaps think about these children, and think about the children of Melissa Hortman, to think about the families that stand behind those who serve. And you said, when I asked you yesterday if you would do this, you said because they're going to go through a hell, I think were your words, for the rest of their lives. What do you mean by that?
I mean, look at what my mummy had 10 children when daddy was killed, and she was pregnant with an 11th.
Yeah.
Just try to imagine for a moment living in a household where 11 children and the mother all have the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Just think about that. It's a hard dinner table to sit at.
Yeah.
It means that people are very easy to anger. It means that they can't sleep at night. It means that when they go to school and the teacher says, what were the, memorize the sides in the Battle of the Bulge. They're thinking, are you kidding me? I'm not thinking about the Battle of the Bulge. I'm trying to figure out who's coming up to the doorway of my family and what they're going to do. And is it safe? And you want me to walk in to go to college in 2 years? That just happened to my father. How are they going to deal with all of that? And this is not just one generation. It goes on to the next generation, because if you have kids who have not worked through all the symptoms of PTSD, and then they have children, their children didn't also get that this is how you react when you're afraid of something. Yeah. This is how you react when you walk through a dark alley, or you go into a classroom, or you go or you're in a hotel and you have to go through a kitchen. This kind of very, very confusing, because they can't always put their hand on it, their finger on it. Why is it so scary when a car backfires? Why does that freak me out? And it's from something that happened 2 generations ago. So I think they're going to be dealing with a lot, and I think a lot of Americans are dealing with those same symptoms. And
as a country, you think we're all in a post-traumatic stress?
Well, first of all, I do, Maria. I mean, I do, because I think that, first of all, I think America is a country made by people who have experienced extreme stress. That's why they had to leave home and go to a different country. So by definition, basically, everybody here has had that. I also think that, up until recent generations, you couldn't be a woman without being sexually assaulted. Today, it's 1 out of every 4 women in the United States has been sexually assaulted. As you know, worldwide, it's 1 out of 3. Many, many, many have been raped and worse. So, I mean, it's all over the place. If you think you know a family who hasn't had trauma, it's because you don't know that family very well.
Mm,
So, and maybe one of the great things I think you're doing, Maria, is you're normalizing conversations around us.
yeah. Trying, yeah.
Trying,
Yeah.
but and I think you're demonstrating how to do that.
Mm,
And I think that as people get more comfortable with seeing that being modeled
yeah.
and experimenting with it themselves, that
Mm,
that's one of the paths
yeah.
to make our communities, our country, less volatile, more compassionate, more understanding of each other, and make it more easy for us to say, as I said, I love you and I disagree with everything you think politically, but I love you and I want you at my birthday party.
You said, Kerry, that you would like to reach out to Charlie Kirk's family because you could say, I've been here. What would you like to say if you could speak to Charlie Kirk's widow, if you could speak to Melissa Hortman's children, who are young adults? What would you say to them?
I would say my heart is with you, number one.
Mm,
And I would say, number two, you're not alone. It feels like you're alone. You're not. There are people out there who have experienced similar things and who are willing to support you. And there's support services that you really need to take advantage of for you and for your children. I think, both on a very human level, my heart is with you, and on a practical level, here are three things you can do that are going to make a difference. I mean, if somebody said practically, what could I do? See a psychiatrist, see a family therapist. If you have any scintilla of faith, develop it, develop it, develop it. And if you don't, work on a meditation practice, work on mindfulness, find another way to get, centered and understand that you're not your emotions. And
beautiful. Beautiful. And check out grief therapy. As you said, there are so many grief counselors that are now out there. There are so many grief circles. There are so many people beginning to talk about their grief, new grief and really old grief, and which I find so heroic. And I love what you said, that if you look at a family and you think they've had no trauma, you don't know that family. And perhaps that's one of the unifiers here. While everybody talks about what divides us, maybe what unites us and what we have in common is trauma, is post-traumatic stress, is grief. And that if we can focus there, actually, and that our humanity, that can begin a different kind of conversation to move us forward.
I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And and then I would just say, and let's try and find ways to lead with love, lead with our hearts,
Yeah.
and less with our, dukes up.
Amen.